So I'd like to welcome everybody to Surviving the Holidays webinar. And my name is Nick Mima, and I've been involved with facilitating classes and doing individual coaching with couples and individuals who are navigating most oftentimes the ending or the beginning of the ending of a relationship. And so we know how difficult the holidays can be, and so wanted to offer support. And so Kevin and Lisa and I, part of Rebuilders, are creating a whole set of programs to support it. But my background is having facilitated with hundreds of students now in person and mostly online, and committed my professional life to helping people through what I think is the most difficult period in our lives. A divorce is so complex, and just talking about divorce and holidays just raises to the forefront just how difficult divorce can be and how complex and all the different layers and levels of complexity that come into play here. So I'm going to be making probably spend about 10 or 15 minutes offering some suggestions, and then if any of you have questions, if you scroll down to the very bottom, excuse me, there's a chat, there's a little cloud that says chat, and you can just click on that and type, and we'll also be opening up the floor to questions once I get through my initial presentation, if you want to call it that. So glad you're here, delighted to have all of you here, and welcome Julie as well. Hi, Julie. Julie, can you hear me? Well, hopefully Julie can hear me, and there'll probably be other people who will be joining us, so we're going to just proceed. So the whole thing about the holidays is that they're generally difficult for everybody, and therapists most oftentimes have a really busy time during the holidays and right after the holidays, because people, adults particularly, having to deal with their in-laws or deal with their parents, um, and that's really challenging. And then in addition to that, there's a spike in divorce filings right after the holidays. So what we find is that people who have a difficult or challenging relationship to start with, the holidays highlight it, because a lot of times we can be going about our day-to-day work. I go to work, you go to work, and then during the holidays we're together, and they can be stressful because of trying to orchestrate all kinds of different schedules and travel sometimes. And so uh, even as a couple, holidays were stressful. So now here you are on your own, and this is what we're talking about, is the first time you have your Thanksgiving as a person who's no longer married, and the first Christmas and the first New Year's, the first holidays. So just to highlight that. So number one, be realistic. They've always been challenging to start with, and what oftentimes I find that people do is sentimentalize the holidays. When they remember all the positive things from Christmas or Thanksgiving or New Year's past, not remembering all the challenges and all the frustrations that you had during those times. So to be careful, and I'll say a little bit more about that. And one more thing before I start, which is, again, being realistic. A lot of people go into this poor me, I'm all alone, and most people are together with their families. And the reality is that almost half of the population is single. And many people who have been married, such as yourself and myself, roughly 50%, almost 50% get divorced, and then of the people that get remarried, 60% get over 60% get divorced, and then for the third time, people it's in the 70 percentile. So you're not alone. Being a single person is not a kiss of death, and roughly 25 to 30% of people who have gotten divorced never get remarried. So it's being single is something that can be a really enjoyable, meaningful time of your life. So just to not create it that you're not married, now you're separated, now you're divorced, and now you're cursed, and nobody wants to be with you. You're all alone, and there's something wrong with you. You failed to let that go and to step into the holidays with a much more positive and realistic attitude. So the one of the major things is to plan ahead. Thanksgiving's coming, Christmas is coming, New Year's is coming. We know that, but many people don't actually plan ahead. What are you going to be doing on those holidays? Who are you going to be with? And what do you want to be doing on those holidays? And so if you have children, you may have to work out the parenting schedule with your former spouse about who has the children on what holiday, and then you might be Christmas might be with him or her, and then the next day with you, or vice versa, and similar with Thanksgiving and all the different holidays. So just really being clear what you're going to be doing on those days and planning ahead. So that's a major thing that we found over and over and over again. People wait until the last minute, don't really want to think about it, and then here they are on Thanksgiving Day, and they haven't gotten any invitations, and there they sit by themselves. That's happened many, many times in walking with people through this. So in our programs, our 10-week programs, we really want to create the perspective that divorce can be the doorway to a whole new future. And so these holidays begin to provide the opportunity, excuse me, begin to provide the opportunity for you to do that. What can you do during Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's this year that will set the template for future holidays? And so you're starting new traditions. So seeing the possibilities of what could be, and being creative. And so that's a real major part of imagining how these holidays could be something that could be enjoyable for you. And so what do you want to do is a critical question. What do you need, and what do you want to do during these holidays? And who do you want to be with? So I'm going to have more to say about relating to your friends and relatives. But one of the major things that we focus on in all our programs is the avoiding the victim consciousness, the poor me, having the self-pity, comparing what you're doing compared to what your ex is doing, or other people that you know that you used to be in relationship with. So that's it's a big trap that people fall into, the poor me, self-pity, victim consciousness trap. So one of the major ways to avoid that is to create a list of all the people that you have on your support team, all your friends, all the relatives that you can call on, and be able to call them up, because one of the things that you're going to go through are lots of different emotions. Obviously, you're going to go through grief, and there's going to be moments of grief, and there's going to be moments of sadness. There's going to be moments of anger and guilt and shame and fear and resentment, and that's just a short list. There's a lot more, and so it's really important to be able to identify these feelings, and then to allow yourself to feel them and to be able to express them. And that's why it's important to have friends that you can talk to and say, hey, I'm really struggling right now, and then being able to talk about it. It is a stressful time, and to be able to have that kind of support. Um, so, Kevin, there's a person that just texted me and said, we are on the Zoom, and I'm not sure if I'm going to give you a telephone number, Kevin, to see if there's a problem that you might be able to help them with. Um, so, uh,
Nick, can you give me that number again? Okay, thanks.
um, so asking for support is one of the most important things during this entire process, and knowing that you need it and deserve it. Nobody gets through this process without support. Everybody's going to go through this alone, but you're not going to grow, you're not going to heal, you're not going to transform without support from your friends, from your relatives, and obviously we're here to support you as well through our various programs. Um, so I'm not going to talk a lot about children today, a little bit, but um, in a week or two, we are going to potentially focus exclusively on children, and would love it if you would email us with questions you might have. But there's a lot of points to be made about children, but there's different ages of children that and how to relate to them during the how to parent them during the holiday. So I don't want to spend a lot of time tonight about that, but I do want to make a couple of points. That the number one point is that you being as strong and stable as you possibly can be, and that's what one of the things that we really are here for. If you are strong and stable, your children have somebody to attach to. Now, this is a small child and adult children and everybody in between. Um, so often we find that parents who don't have support aren't taking care of themselves really are an emotional uh, are not able to control their emotions and have a really hugely negative effect on their children when the children are with them, and then when the children leave to go to your former spouse's home, if that's the situation. Oftentimes, if you are not doing well, they're going to feel guilty about leaving you, which puts an enormous burden on the children. So as strong as you can possibly be, and as supportive of them as you possibly can be, and supportive of them going over to your former spouse or partner, and just encouraging them when they are gone, then you can really have more of a chance to process all your emotions, and for you to get together with friends and other people to get that kind of support. So that's really, I think, one of the major things I wanted to say about parenting. So now the major thing too is when you get together with friends and relatives, what we often find is that it's really helpful to have certain kind of boundaries or certain kind of rules for yourself. Number one, you're not there to talk about your ex. People oftentimes, you go to your relatives and they haven't seen you for a while, and they know your spouse, your former spouse from previous years and all the years you've been together, and they'll ask, "How is your ex doing?" And so be really stringent about not responding directly to it. Just say, we're separated, we're divorced, or we're divorcing, and I really don't know how they're doing. And so if they persist in asking questions, saying, this is a really difficult time for me. And so when you bring up how he or she is doing, it's really difficult. And so it'd be really helpful if you didn't bring up my ex anymore today. Um, and then sometimes people say, well, what happened? What went wrong? As if there's a single cause, and it's not a legitimate question anyway. So my encouragement is just to be prepared and say, we just got to a place where it wasn't sustainable. And that's true for a lot of people. As I said earlier, a high percentage of people get divorced. So there's all kinds of quote reasons for divorce, but the bottom line is it's not sustainable. These two people, who you and your ex, me and my former um, wife, I'm married for a second time, but we're not able to create a sustainable marriage. It's not about fault, and there's no simple explanation. There's all kinds of underlying basis for the fact that we didn't get along or weren't able to resolve conflict or whatever was the basis for it. So really be careful not to be drawn into defending yourself and then accordingly go into blaming your former spouse. So avoid all of that by just saying, I really don't want to talk about it. It wasn't sustainable. Um, and another thing that we find frequently is that people want to tell you what to do. Oh, now that you're divorced or getting divorced, here's what you should do. And they might have a friend that they want you to start. You're not even divorced or barely divorced, and they want to hook you up with somebody, or they want to give you sympathy. Oh, I really feel sorry. Sympathy, advice, and also judgment. Some families can be very, very judgmental towards you. Maybe they always were judgmental towards you anyway, but now that you're getting divorced, some people, because they're very uncomfortable, even in their own relationship. And I myself had a very religious upbringing, and so divorce was wrong, and so I had to deal with a fair amount of judgment and criticism and some shaming, being the first, still the only person in my entire lineage that got divorced. So you may find that, so you have to be prepared to not allow people to give you advice, not to, just say, hey, I don't really need advice right now, just here to have a good time for the holiday. Or, hey, that sounds very judgmental, and please stop, that's not comfortable. So what I'm trying to underscore here is you having inner authority, you being able to speak your truth and have boundaries where necessary, because that's one of the major things, that if you have shame about your divorce or your relationship ending, if you feel guilty about it, if you feel any of those feelings, you can be very susceptible to other people, particularly relatives, kind of triggering you there and getting you at a very susceptible place. So just be prepared to say, stop, I don't want to talk about it. What he's doing or how she's doing, I don't know. Just don't. So I'd be glad to talk more about that later on if any of you have questions. But just to watch out for that. And so that each holiday is different. Thanksgiving, you have had traditions for Thanksgiving, and so that's coming up. And one of the major things about Thanksgiving, of course, is gratitude. And so what I would, in our programs, we always highlight this, and I would urge you, starting tonight, if you haven't done this already, is to start at the end of the day or in the morning, to just start writing down things you're grateful for. Myself, I have a journal right on my nightstand, so every night I write down things that I'm grateful for. And a gratitude journal is one of the most important things you can ever do anyway, but it's really helpful and important during this holiday season to 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 avoid focusing on what you don't have, because there are losses. These are all the different ways that you have done your major holidays, and you're not going to do them that way anymore. And so there are losses, and there are certain relatives that you may never ever have any connection with again because they were on his or her side of the family. There may be certain friends who no longer associate with you because of the divorce, and they've chosen sides, or they don't want to associate with single people and so forth. So there's a lot of losses you have to feel those losses in terms of the grief and the sadness that goes with it, but at the same time, there's a lot that you do have. So focusing on what you do have and being grateful, and then going into Thanksgiving with that kind of attitude will make it, and then also Christmas and New Year's. But speaking, we call it Thanksgiving because it's a time to be grateful, time to be thankful, and then um, starting some of your own traditions around the holidays. Thanksgiving's coming up, and when you're together, maybe you went over, your ex's parents' home or some relative, and that's not going to be possible anymore. So really think through what you want to do. That's one of the things that a lot of people going through this process don't do. They don't think about what I want, what I need, and so we can talk more about different ideas for that, and you might have some of your own. Christmas is another one where a lot of times people out of guilt will buy a lot of gifts that they can't afford or the kids don't need, and then you have sometimes competitions that go on, the two parents vying for the approval and affection of their children, and buying too many gifts and stretching, going beyond what they can reasonably afford. So just think through what it is that's important to you to buy for your kids, and limit and put as much emphasis on, doing things together, playing games together, maybe doing some outdoor activities together. That's, in our experience, what people often will tell us matters the most. Um, that you really are active with the kids, and it's not about all the toys and all the gifts. It's more about the togetherness. Um, so um, that's I can say more about Christmas. There's so many different ways that I was just at Home Depot recently, and every year there's more and more different ways that people can decorate for the holidays that even 5 years ago weren't possible. So you can do some decorations with yourself, with your friends, with your relatives. And one of the challenges is when you start to divide up all the Christmas ornaments, the his and the hers ornaments, and that can be a very challenging time. So really to take your time with that, and say, I'm not going to use all of these, and then maybe get some new ornaments. Again, you're starting a new tradition. So this is all part of the first. What do you imagine for yourself that you're doing some things that you can enjoy doing that will then set the template for a future year? And then same with New Year's. Now, New Year's is something that a lot of people don't make that big a fuss about, but I would encourage you, again, imagining divorce to be the doorway to a whole new future. And we use this arbitrary thing of New Year, but I would encourage you to think about that this is a year, it's a new year for you, New Year as a single person. Last year, when you went through New Year's, you weren't. How can you imagine this year different from any other year where you can start to do things that will really make your life more wonderful? We're always supporting you creating a more wonderful life. So, and then back to Christmas just for a second, where with Christmas, there's so much, particularly with Christmas, there's so much, the songs and all the media and all the hype about I'll Be Home for Christmas, and all the different songs that reinforce the illusion that everybody is in a happy marriage, and that's the way it ought to be. And then you're remembering, Christmas is past. We're all very susceptible to the conditioning that we've had, particularly for Christmas and to some extent for Thanksgiving too, where we just have these images and this condition of culture about how it's supposed to be. And there is no real supposed to be. And make really, for your own sake, getting clear about what do you want to do for each of these holidays, and then getting a supportive team of friends and relatives that can support you in doing that. I've tried to be general and at the same time be clear about things to watch for and what not to watch for, but I wanted to create time for questions. So each of you has a mute button, and you can unmute it, or you can type in a question, but I welcome the opportunity to hear what your questions are, and then we can focus on those right now if you have any. Anybody can fire away.
I would just say, it's not really a question, but I'm actually really excited about these holidays because I don't have to do anything. One of the big stressors in my relationship was that each holiday had to be better than the last one, and just more special and done just right. And so I'm actually really looking forward to just kind of taking a breath and just a bit of a timeout. And I like what you said about thinking about what I want it to look like for me, because before I didn't really have that opinion. So I think that's something that I'd be thinking about.
So just before you leave, quick question. Do you have any ideas about what you want Thanksgiving and Christmas to look like for you already?
Yeah, so it's different. I'm not, I didn't grow up in America. And so Thanksgiving for me, it has meaning, but I don't have all of those growing up traditions associated with it. So I think for me, that one, I think this year I really would like to not go to a family thing. I do have extended family I can do something with if I chose to. Christmas, I really like it being small and intimate. We've always done Christmas on Christmas Eve growing up instead of Christmas morning. So yeah, I think I'd like to do that and maybe find a church service to go to, which is something that before we could never really fit in. So kind of quiet and cozy and kind of smaller, and I feel like with a little bit more meaning instead of a lot of just noise and things.
A lot of activity.
Yeah.
Before. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, look forward to hearing how that goes.
Yeah.
Other questions, dealing with your ex can be a complicated thing during the holiday. So I invite any questions you might have about that. Right now, anybody have any kind of questions at all about anything that I've said, or anything that's kind of you're wondering about as you think about the holidays, and anything that you're going to be challenged with as you start to think about it?
Nick, I want to just point out something that was interesting today in the news. Just this afternoon, CNN did a story about how they're finding out that the holidays often leave people with a very just health issues because of the stress around getting together with family and how things go. And so, I want to just point out one thing around that, which is taking care of your health and what can you do to position yourself to be in the best place possible, with whatever it is for health wise, is another piece to think about.
Yeah, and so what Kevin raises is a good another. So one of the things that people often don't do during the holidays is really take care of themselves, eat too much. And another thing that happens is particularly alcohol. Oftentimes, partly as a way to cope, partly as a way to numb, partly just to fit in. People often drink too much alcohol, and that causes consequences, because there's that alcohol obviously affects different people differently, but it can really be something that can have the next day and even that day affect your emotions and how stable you are with it. And then also children, and how you're dealing with alcohol and how you're in control. So I would really urge you to be mindful of how much you're eating, eat well, get some exercise, and be very careful. And that, I don't know, Kevin, if we can put that article up, the link to it up on our website, but or some way let people know about
Yeah,
that.
we can send something out for sure.
Cool.
Post it.
Other questions that people have right now as you're thinking about the holidays? And this is, just every question you have is helpful because it probably will stimulate somebody else.
Nick, we got a question. What is the best way to split the holidays with your kids and your ex?
What is the best way to do that? Well, we're going to be talking about that in a future session too. But the best way is for you and your ex to have a conversation ahead of time about exactly what the schedule is going to be. That's the most important starting point because the kids really want to know, ahead of time, what's happening. And if you can both agree on what the schedule is and when they're going to be at one house and when and how they're going to get to the next house, and then ideally having some conversation about what how to reinforce what I said earlier about not talking negatively about it. Sometimes just say, hey, let's have an agreement that, because sometimes you might be real solid about this, but your ex may not, and just reinforce, hey, we're here to have the holidays be a positive experience and for the kids and for everybody. And so, because when any one partner, ex-partner, starts bad mouthing his or her former spouse, it affects everybody in the room, including the children. So reinforcing sort of the pact, if you will, the agreement. The third is to have some kind of understanding, certainly around Christmas. There's certain gifts that the kids might want, and if both of you are both buying the same gifts, there's a way in which it can be not a helpful thing to do. And what are they going to do with two of them? And yes, they can leave them. And it's oftentimes a sense of, I'm going to have a whole set of toys and games at one house, but what kids learn to do is what really matters to them they take with them, and it provides more of a connection in their life. If they have two separate lives, it can be a bit schizophrenic. So if they can take their games with them and their toys with them, there's more of a connection between both parts of their lives. So that's an agreement that parents come up with, and also what's going to happen in addition to the holidays themselves. Travel sometimes is involved. Myself, after my divorce, I traveled from Michigan to New Jersey with my daughters, and so that took some additional time. So my ex-wife had to understand that, and then similarly, people when they're traveling for any holidays and the kids are going with them, the ex has to be plugged in and have an agreement around that. And so that's I'm going to say more about this in a future webinar, but that's a first cut. So I'd appreciate knowing what each of you has in the back of your mind as greatest concerns or greatest questions about how to deal with the holidays or what's coming up, or so I invite everybody to just plug in here and jump in. Don't be bashful. You can just slide your cursor and unmute yourself at the bottom of your screen.
Well, Nick, this is Rob. I guess I'll start it off. I guess generally concerned about this will be the first time that we will not be celebrating excuse me, as a family, and that I think your discussions that you had earlier, laying things out and having good plans, I think that'll be really important. and starting some new traditions while still maintaining, some existing ones. But I think just the idea, at least for me, especially, first time after 21 years, it looks like I'll probably have the kids for Christmas. She'll have them for Thanksgiving, and then New Year's is kind of up in the air. But it's just a really understanding that drawing back on our class back this summer, that I'm enough. I'm enjoying my new life and still maintaining contact with kids and that sort of thing. So I think it's just, for me, it'll be it's a good idea to really plan ahead, and so that I'm not able to just kind of dwell and wallow.
Right. That is, it's very, very easy to dwell and wallow and to really, so that's why, just to reinforce what you just said, Robert, just to keep reminding yourself of how enough you are, as instead of in the old way of focusing on how not enough you were. And then it's so easy to get caught in the self-pity and feeling sorry for yourself and the wallowing, and that's what you're talking about. Do you have any particular thoughts about what you're going to be doing, starting your own tradition for, I think you said Christmas is going to be yours?
Well, this year will be, she's taking the kids for Thanksgiving and going back to see her family. So I'm really looking forward to, being here in Colorado. I've got family nearby, the cousins and I, and maybe even some of the grandparent type or my parent type generation. We're going to get together, and we haven't done that in probably a dozen years. And so I'm really looking forward to just catching up with family, and being able to enjoy their company and support, and building on that. And then, Christmas, I think my wife will be in, out of state. And so I'll be able to just, really focus in on the kids, and then, we'll hand off, after that week, and then she'll have them for New Year's. And so, I'll try and celebrate, I guess you could say, kind of the Christmas New Year, and then she'll celebrate the New Year Christmas, and just kind of see. But just like you said, really focus in on the kids and not so much on the stuff, but really bonding and doing things with them over that break.
So one of the things, Robert, that you said that I want to reinforce it, what you can do now, what you have the opportunity to do now, what's possible now that you couldn't do before. And so that's, it's so often that people get stuck in what they lost as opposed to what they can now create and what's possible. And I loved your excitement about getting together with your family on Thanksgiving. I could, that's wonderful. So thanks for offering that. Anything else, Robert, that you wanted to plug in?
No, I guess, we'll just have to see. We're still in the process of going through the filing and separating, and probably be early next spring by the time everything is done. And so, it's working through that, but still trying to maintain, a amicable and safe environment for the kids is going to be really important.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. Good.
Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. So I want to check in with anybody else. So we've got quite a few people on the call, so really encourage you to share questions, thoughts, reflections, whatever, to use this time together in a prudent way. Other questions? Ideas?
Hi, Nick. It's Margaret.
Hi, Margaret.
So this will be my first one alone, but I know last year when we knew we were going to get divorced, my husband was not interested in having conversation. Like, it was so difficult to have those conversations. Is there a way, like, I'm kind of past it now, and now we know what we're going to do, but I was just thinking if other people kind of had that situation where, their spouse is really making this hard.
Yeah.
Because I suffered through that.
So that's a great question, and it's an unfortunate situation that amicable, pleasant, civil endings may be more of an exception than the rule. So doing whatever each of you can do that can add civility to the possibility without compromising what you really need. In other words, not being codependent and just letting him or her have what they want, and then you give up just to try to keep the peace, but it's not what you want. So my experience is if you can put the kids right in front and say, for the sake of the kids, really what I'm wondering about is if we could do this. For the sake, in starting almost every sentence, for the sake of the kids. And again, some people, some exes are not getting emotional support, not getting counseling, coaching, or not doing the 10-week program, or not doing any of these kinds of things, and are very much in blaming you, their partner, for the fact that they're in pain, the fact that this is hard, and they want to make sure everybody in the world knows that it's your fault that this is happening, when in fact, of course, it's not true. And so if that's the case, and it is sometimes, is often the case, then it's really going back to what I said earlier about getting as much support as you possibly can for yourself, and with friends and relatives, to buffer how challenging it is with your ex, and so that if you have friends and relatives that can participate in Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's to the extent that you want them to, your kids are going to have a stable group of people that they can relate to. When they go over to your exes, you can't control that, and that's one of the, so often I've heard, having had hundreds of students and clients, I've heard horrendous stories of what exes have done to sabotage, out of, some of them because they're not mentally well, mental health issues, some of them just because they just haven't worked through any of this stuff. And again, we tend to blame other people as a way to discharge anger and feelings of hurt and shame and guilt, all kinds of. So the easiest thing to do when we're feeling a lot of conflicted feelings is to blame somebody else instead of take responsibility for it. So there's no simple one size fits all answer, but at least it's a response. Margaret, do you have any kind of follow up to that?
No, I mean, it was terrible. And so I wish I had known that. This year, he doesn't have a choice, so it'll be better. But I just wanted to add, I have a friend that she does a Friendsgiving, and that's where I'm going for Thanksgiving. And it's so fun. And, there's so many of us that just don't have family around or don't have family at Thanksgiving. And it's become one of my favorite things every year. So I was just going to kind of throw that in that.
And so I'm not sure everybody knows. Can you just say just a little bit more about what Friendsgiving looks like?
Yeah, she actually doesn't have it on Thanksgiving. She has it the weekend before, but she likes her friends more than her family. So we all they do the turkey and potatoes or something, and the rest of us just bring whomever and whatever side dish we want. And it's just so nice because you can be there by choice. But I've often thought I would, if I got where I was by myself on Thanksgiving too, I would do something like that on Thanksgiving, because it's just so nice. And there's people that are by themselves or just, want to still do Thanksgiving, but family is not healthy for them. So it's become a really, like I said, I've done it 2 times with her, and it's just one of my favorite things.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Again, how do you use your friends and positive relatives. Because as Kevin was pointing out, there's we growing up biologically, we have these people called fathers and mothers and grandparents and aunts and uncles and so forth. And a lot of times they are not the most pleasant, positive, and sometimes they're even toxic. So there's usually some people in our family who fit those descriptions that we don't need to. Now we have a choice, and then your ex had some of the same things, and again, where we felt locked in. And hopefully now each of you is finding more and more freedom to do this in the way that you want to do it, with whom you want to do it, when you want to do it. So thanks, Margaret. Gary, do you have any questions that are kind of you're mulling over?
No, because the situation's a little different. I mean, this is my second divorce. My kids are 20 and 24. We've already got it planned out. Me and my kids have talked about it quite a bit. Their mother and I have had an established pattern for 10 years. So the advice I could give, just go back to when I got divorced from their mother, some people have said this, is planning's really important. We got into finally, or pretty quickly, a pretty set routine every year if you could do it, you know? So the kids had consistency. Whether, I had Thanksgiving, but I didn't have Christmas Day. My Christmas was another day. That was very helpful. Kids could always rely on something every year.
The predictability.
Kids and I are going to do a day of giving back. I think the day after Thanksgiving, we're going to do a service project.
Got it.
It was actually my daughter's idea several years ago.
So doing a volunteer kind of thing.
Yeah, and the gift thing, I remember when I got divorced, that's a good point you made. That was really hard. What I ended up doing was just kind of forcing the issue just a little bit. I would send it to my ex and say, this is what I plan to get them. And if she got upset or whatever, I try not to let it bother me. I just wanted to get the ball rolling of a discussion to get it done.
Good. And now you are separate from your kids, the relationship that just ended, that you're just coming out of.
Right.
You had Christmases with her?
Yeah, I go on Thanksgiving. It's a big deal at my family. We have 50, 60 people. On Thanksgiving Day, we'll still do that. We'll be able to stay longer this year. My kids are excited about that. With Melanie, we then celebrated Thanksgiving with her family the weekend after Thanksgiving. My kids and I'll do our service event and go shopping for Christmas decorations for my house. We did Christmas with her and her family every year. My kids are going to do it with just me on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day.
Got it.
And then their mother the day after. And then the three of us, me and my two kids, we're going back up to where my daughter lives in Chicago. We started doing this last year when I was married for 3 days together.
Got it. Got it. Well, it sounds like you have, you're prepared.
Because Christmas was stressful in my second marriage. So kind of looking forward to it.
So this is, and again, an example what Gary's talking about is where this is an opportunity to do it differently and to highlight how Christmases past were often and Thanksgivings and so forth were often not pleasant, were often very stressful, including travel sometimes, to his or her relatives for the holidays. And there's many people are relieved when the holidays are over because there is so much stress associated with them. So hopefully, as a result of what we're talking about, and be glad to talk to you individually as well. So just to make this as least stressful and setting the template for, as Gary was talking about, if you have kids, setting the template for years to come in your own way, and establishing your own traditions and doing some of the things that you could do that be enjoyable to you, that and even food. Food is such a personal thing, and a lot of times our exes don't necessarily like the food that we do. And one other thing that my tradition, my background is Dutch, and back in the Netherlands, December 5th is St. Nicholas Day, and that's when gift giving happens in the Netherlands, and Christmas is more of a religious holiday. And so with my first wife, we had a tradition of certainly doing some gift giving on December 5th, and some of the traditional foods that went. The challenge with my second marriage is December 5th is my second wife's birthday, so I've had to let that go. But it was certainly a meaningful thing when my daughters are growing up. So just again to establish certain traditions. Each municipality has certain things that they do for the holidays. In Denver, Colorado, there's the botanical gardens that have lights, and in different parts of the country, there's something going on for the holidays and concerts, and so participating in some of those by yourself, with friends, with particular relatives, can really be meaningful. And where in the past, I had a conversation today with a client that's going through a divorce, and her ex-husband never wanted to participate in anything, literally anything, and wanted to stay home all the time. And so she now is able to start doing activities that she really wants to do, starts associating with people that this is a whole new holiday season for her, and it's starting to set the template for a future that she has wanted for a long time. So available for a little bit longer. We had imagined that the call would run about an hour and 15 minutes, and so want to double check to see if just check in by name. Dave, do you have any questions? You can unmute yourself, Dave. Do you have? Maybe not. Okay, Frank. Any questions that you might have? I think Frank, I know that Frank was having a little trouble with the computer. And how about you, Rhonda? So there we go, Dave. Dave, you had it for a second. There you go. Any questions or thoughts that you would like to share?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep, perfectly.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I had trouble getting in. Let me hear an echo. But I'm not sure where that's coming from.
So we can hear you, Dave. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. So this will be my first time where my ex-fiance won't be available for Christmas or Thanks. And so I've been talking with my kids. I used to go with my ex-wife, and that was kind of uncomfortable. So I am working on a new plan to start a new tradition with my kids. And we're going to try it this year. It's going to be a low-key thing.
Mm-hmm. So I'm laughing about Dave's clocks. So you're going to do something new, and now that you don't have your ex-fiance to factor into the whole thing, you have more freedom, it sounds like.
Correct.
Is there any particular low-key thing that you're going to do that you're looking forward to?
I think it's going to be more like a special dinner.
And that's for Thanksgiving now, or?
Probably both, Thanksgiving and dinner. And
Okay.
So the gift exchange would just be with me and my kids.
Got it. Okay. Well, thanks, Dave. Appreciate your, again, it's what you're now able to do, and it sounds like it's going to be much more relaxing. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I think so.
So, Rhonda, any questions? Um, so, and I'm not sure, there's somebody on the phone and I'm not sure if you have any questions, and so we're gonna just proceed to, I'm just gonna do a little bit of a summary for our time together. And so the having boundaries and being assertive is something that I really want to emphasize. So often people going through the holidays for the first time feel very, very vulnerable, and as a result, are not feeling as strong as they could, and then don't have boundaries, and they become very codependent. They become, by codependent is, not speaking their mind and not speaking their truth, and as a result, just giving their power over to somebody else. I'll be okay if you're okay, and I don't want to rock the boat. And as a result, they start feeling more and more weak and more vulnerable, and then more self-judgmental and critical. And we all have what we call an inner judging critic, and to be mindful of how active the judging critic is for each of us when we're going through a vulnerable time. And this is again why I want to emphasize the 10-week program, and anybody that you could suggest come to it, because of the support that you can get and what you can learn from them, but also your family and friends, the ones that are supportive, because there are all these old programs that are running inside of you, and the judging critic saying things like, well, you should be, you failed, and look at what you've done to your kids, and all these kinds of things that are that really are cruel and harmful and destructive if you let them in. So having a strong kind of stance inside of yourself about dealing with the judging critic and talking to relatives and friends so that you are buffered from that to strengthen, because it's such a vulnerable time. And so I really would encourage you, to line up that support. Myself, what I did is I wrote down the names of every single friend that I felt like could provide support. When I said felt like I could provide support, be careful about those people who want to give you a lot of advice. That's not who you want to be talking to. And then writing all those names down, and then being prepared to have those people be on call, or to set up specific times when you can talk with them during the holidays. And then there's usually time between between Christmas and New Year's, where you can set up times with relatives and friends to do recreational things, go to coffee, go on hikes, and have more relaxing time, and where you can just really strengthen your relationships, but also for you to get the additional support. That's what I really want to stress for you. It's really critical that you get support during this first Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year, so that you're able to come through them feeling good about yourself and what you did, as opposed to not having the support and the judging critic, and the songs are playing on the radio and so forth, and you end up feeling really negative about yourself and your experience, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So we're here to support you. Contact us, the website or email. We do have the 10-week program that we're starting at one just before Thanksgiving, and some of you may not know this, but we just created a video that's not live, it's recorded that people can access. So we have a special discount that we're offering for this season. So just to check in, anybody that's not familiar with our 10-week program to contact us about that. And also we have the free quiz, the after divorce adjustment test on our website. So really anybody that's struggling right now during the holidays that you know of and you're going to meet people, have them contact us, because we can be a huge resource for them with our individual work and with our all the different articles we have on the website. And so I just really want to wish each of you a very happy Thanksgiving, and stand by to support you in any way we can. And then of course with the Christmas and New Year's down the road, really wishing you all the best. And if there's anything we can do to support you, let us know. Everybody have a good night, and we'll talk to you soon, I hope. Take care.
All right.
Good night.
Bye.